What is Tank Game? Is it a tank? Is it a game? Neither. It's a game I made about a year ago, and guess what? It sucked. Unresponsive clunky controls, bullets constantly hit you, and the whole thing gets ruined once you become a bullet hose. But a bad idea is the first step on the road to publishing a game. So recently, I started making an entirely new tank game where bullets constantly hit you, but this time it doesn't suck. And that game is Sandripper, a twin-stick shooter set in rural Canada. It's still a wave survival shooter where you have not one, not two, but two guns bound to different buttons. But this time you're a hover tank with a very volatile nuclear engine. It's fast, it's fun, and it's coming soon. That's right, it's coming out January 2024 for PC. Anyway, getting the game to this point required fixing the issues with the tank game. Tank game had you pick one upgrade each round. That upgrade would stack if you picked it again, and since the gameplay was quite simple, if you got a string of decent upgrades, the difficulty curve would look like this. I thought a decent way of fixing this was to simply extend the curve, make it take longer to become overpowered. How would I do this exactly? Well, the plan was to make a full-on tank sim, where you scour a huge wasteland, traveling from town to town, liberating the people from a big evil army. And in return, they'd give you supplies and upgrades. But out in the desert, you could encounter enemy convoys and camps to raid for supplies. At these camps and caves, you would hop out of your tank and go in on foot in a nuclear throne style twin sticky thing to eliminate the enemy and plunder their resources. I spent a good amount of time prototyping enemies, weapons, and their upgrades, as well as trying to give more reasons why the player would want to hop out of their tank. So a gas and water system was added. The harder you drove, the more gas and water was consumed to keep the engine running. If you ran out of gas, you could hop out of the tank and travel on foot with a small satchel of water, hopefully enough to get you to the nearest town. At that town, you could buy some gasoline and then carry it back to your tank. I was quite happy with this concept for an immersive Mad Maxy tank simulator, so I started work on what I thought was going to be the hardest thing to make, the open world tech. I tried to make my own chunk system, but after spending a solid week on it and not seeing a huge amount of progress, I knew it was going to be more work than I anticipated. So I thought, hey, what if the world is just a bunch of levels that get stitched together? But that idea also didn't last long because I knew that the amount of work it would take to make all those levels would be tremendous without some kind of level editor, and I don't know how to make one of those. So what now? I really didn't want to abandon this idea, so I held on to it as long as I could while switching my focus to the core gameplay, driving around and shooting things. I made some pretty solid driving AI for the enemies. I also put more thought into making interesting enemies and weapons. Once it was all put together, I found that it just wasn't fun. I spent all this time and it wasn't much better than that 3-day prototype. This time around there was a little more in the way of visuals and maybe weapon variety, but the core gameplay still had those exact same pitfalls that Tank Game had. So I left it be for a bit. I went and did other things. Even though I called it quits, I couldn't stop thinking about it. But then, something happened. An epiphany. Something made me see. It was this. I made this as a joke, but I kid you not, making this changed my whole perspective on the game. Speed was key. If the movement was faster, I could dodge bullets. Crazy, I know, but this was opening the door to a radically different game than I originally wanted. I was so stubborn with that tank sim idea that I couldn't think of more interesting solutions to problems. Drifting around with this new movement was fun, but I had an idea that would tear any semblance of tank sim away. I took your wheels off and gave you a giant thruster. Now you could move around in any direction, and if you wanted some more speed, you could activate the thruster, and it would boost you in the direction you were facing. The major reason for these radical changes was one particular scene from the show The Expanse. Our heroes, piloting an unarmed racing ship, are being hunted. They've been at maximum burn for minutes, stressing the ship and their bodies to their breaking point, trying to evade the enemy. their pursuer launches a torpedo. And with no other option, our pilot decides to eject the superheated fuel core powering the ship. The core collides with the torpedo just in time. So, like any good artist, I shamelessly stole the concept and made it my own kinda. So now, in the game you can boost to increase your speed and heat up your engine. Once it reaches a certain temperature, you can dump your core. Failing to do so in time will cause your core to dump itself into your tank. Core dumps add a devastating extra attack that can only be refilled by picking up the fuel rods dropped from enemies. This was fun. Now remember, one of the issues with tank game was that infinitely stacking upgrades got boring. So I removed upgrades, for now at least, and tried to come up with guns that were interesting enough without any upgrades. The idea here was to push players to rapidly swap back and forth between their guns based on the situation, while also not constraining weapons too hard to a specific job. Of course, eventually I'd bring back upgrades, but I figured if the weapons on their own each had a little skill curve, it would make the game fun for longer. The first unique weapon was what is now called the mag cannon, a weapon that changes from shotgun to railgun the longer you hold down the trigger. The second gun is a basic machine gun, but with the added bonus of shooting faster the hotter your engine is. This was the only weapon combo in the game for quite a while, but it was a great proof of concept. The machine gun pushed you to go fast, maintaining your engine heat, while the mag cannon let you shoot down rockets and eventually take down enemy shields really fast. After a steady month of tweaking, adding, and testing it by myself, I finally opened it up to everyone in my Discord server. After watching friends play and getting tons and tons of feedback, I knew there was so much that needed to be done in the way of designing. This was accidentally my first bullet hell, with my first take on boss fights, and my first go at fast-paced gameplay. There were issues, of course, but those issues were balanced out by the hope of solving them. After 2 rounds of playtests, gathering tons of feedback, I made a solid plan and got straight to work. Just kidding, I did not touch the game for 3 months. It's just what happens sometimes. During this time, a lot happened, but there was one good thing that happened. Earlier in the year, I was given a copy of Deep Rock Galactic by a friend of mine. Now, I couldn't really get into the game at that time, but during those 3 months, it clicked hard, and I couldn't be more happy that it did. That game and its take on weapon design, upgrades, and enemies was the best thing that ever happened for Sandripper. My brain was flooded with ideas and mechanics that I wanted to implement. Give me some status effects, some swarm clear, single target damage weapon combos. Give me interchangeable weapons, funny overclocks. I had a plan and I was back in full swing. I slugged away at improving the game until I opened it up for another round of tests at the beginning of September, which went extremely well. Now, I just need to finish the game. If you want to keep up with development and even give the game a try, follow me on Twitter, join the Discord, and don't forget to wishlist Sandripper on Steam. Thank you.